Hey guys, and welcome to my channel. I guess this is the first time I'm showing my face, so nice to see you. But I thought I'd make a video on this topic and kind of like my experience. So as you might have guessed from the title, I'm making £50,000 plus whilst doing my PhD, and I get that that sounds really braggy, but I guess I wanted to share my experience because I didn't even know that this was a possibility when I was graduating from uni. So I graduated from uni in 2020 from Imperial College with a master's in engineering, and I remember at the time I was leaning towards wanting to do a PhD, but there were two things that were kind of holding me back. Number one, I guess this is the more important one, is that I didn't realize I wanted to do a PhD until like my last year. So I'd kind of dropped the ball a bit. And I only realized, like, even towards the end of my last year, is when I kind of realized, oh, maybe I like this whole kind of academic stuff and it might be cool to kind of continue and do a PhD. And by then it was kind of a bit late to start, networking with all the professors. I didn't know any of the professors that were teaching me, so I was a bit kind of stuck. But also I kind of just slipped into this inertia where I'd already had a grad job lined up, and I kind of just thought, well, I've done all this work now to get this grad job, don't really want to let it go. I might just go with it. But also on top of that, it's kind of like a well-known thing that, the PhD stipend isn't like a huge amount of money, right? Compared to the grad job I had got, the grad job paid more than the PhD stipend, and I kind of wanted to experience some of that, the money life, or just having a bit more money, not living as like a broke student anymore, really. So I kind of just went along with it. I just thought, okay, I'll do my job, see what happens. And it was only when my flatmate actually approached me and he mentioned that his company offered to pay for his education if he wanted to do it, and they had like a policy around it. And I thought, oh, I wonder if my company does that. So I won't mention like where I'm working or anything, obviously, because normally that stuff, I feel like, I don't know how, but I feel like it would get you in trouble, so I'm not going to directly mention it. But I will say that I was working at a European bank, and unfortunately at the time, again, this is in 2020, like kind of late 2020, they had a big or cost-cutting policy, and they kind of frozen all kind of funding. So they like straight up were like, no, we can't kind of fund this. And I think that's the thing that in the end prompted me to leave and to join where I'm currently working, which is an American bank. And they were much more friendly towards the idea. So the way it works is it's kind of like a company-wide policy. So you sign a few forms, you get your manager to approve, and maybe his manager as well to approve. You get the PhD itself sorted out, and then you pay the tuition fees, and then you get reimbursed by the employer for however much the fees were. So what this basically means is that not only am I earning the salary and everything, but the employer also pays for the tuition fees, which is really cool because obviously that's a lot of stress taken off your shoulders in terms of like financial stress. I don't have to think so much about where my next meal is coming from or how I'm going to pay the bills and stuff. So that's a very fortunate position to be in. So I guess I'll just discuss some of the pros and cons around this. So pros, the most obvious one, I've kind of been discussing it, right, is the money aspect of it. It's nice to be receiving a full-time salary and having the PhD stuff paid for, whilst being able to do the PhD itself. If you're doing the PhD, it's quite, or for the right reasons, right, it's meant to be quite fulfilling, and I have found that in my experience quite fulfilling doing the PhD. And it's nice to be paid well whilst I'm doing it. I guess the other thing that I wasn't really expecting is kind of security. I feel like I have a bit of a bigger say in what I'm doing in both areas now. So, and the reason is that there's now not just one, but there's two institutions that are willing to even if they're not doing it right now, they're willing to back you financially. So if I really don't like my job, or something really something happens that I just can't stand, I can always just say I'm just gonna go to my university and just go to my supervisor and switch my PhD from part-time to full-time, and like get the stipend and everything. And yeah, I mean, I've just been mentioning that it's not a huge amount, but it's certainly enough. Like it's enough to like live. So that's nice, and kind of vice versa as well. So because like I'm not being gifted a stipend by the university, it's not like charity, I'm paying for this service, so I feel like I have a bigger say over the PhD as well, which is, you know, it's a good thing to have. So if either one of these two things kind of falls through for whatever reason, I know that I can go to the other one to support me in that scenario. Another advantage I think is work experience, because as I was reading around, one of the kind of criticisms for PhDs is the idea that you're not really getting better career prospects than like a master's, for example. So often people say that when you graduate, you want to think about what you want to do, because if you want to go into industry, you might struggle to get a job because your employer will be choosing between different candidates, right? And you've just been doing a PhD for 3 years, which, don't get me wrong, is great experience and stuff, but it's just not quite the same as someone who has hands-on industry experience. So if they're choosing between you, who's done a PhD, and someone who's just spent 3 years, or well, I'm doing a part-time, so 6 years even, doing like work experience, then they might just say like, oh well, we find the work experience more useful and we find that it correlates better to better performance. I don't know. So the thought is that they tend to choose the work experience candidates over the PhD candidates. But again, this isn't an issue now. So I mean, hopefully at the end of this whole thing, I will have a PhD and also the work experience to kind of back it up. So kind of the best of both worlds, right? So I guess that kind of brings us on to cons. The main one is the workload, as you might imagine. Not only are you balancing a PhD, which in itself is quite a lot, even though it is part-time, it's still a big responsibility, and you're trying to balance that with the obligations of a full-time job. For some, it can be, it definitely can be a lot of work to get through. I've been very fortunate in that my manager and my team has been very understanding, so I'm able to manage it quite well, because everyone knows the kind of situation I'm in, so I'm able to explain if things are too much, or if I can't take certain things on, and so that's really useful in my scenario. But I appreciate that that's not the same for everyone. If you have really intense work obligations or really long hours, it's probably going to be really difficult to balance that with the PhD. And in fact, I know others who are in this situation who do find it a bit, it's tough. It's tougher than just focusing on one or the other. I mean, especially if they're in separate topics. If your job and your PhD are in different areas, I feel like it could almost like split your attention, like which one do you want to focus on. So yeah, that can definitely be quite tough to manage. So yeah, that's it. Let me know what you thought of all this, and I guess have a good day. See you next time.